Well, first off, thank you all for being here. Why don't we start by telling our crowd and myself what each of you all do in college sports?
Yeah, so I'm the co-founder of Open Doors, and the college sports ecosystem, the NIL market, we've got it pinned around $1.67 billion will be spent on college athlete and NIL this year. And if you ever wonder how athletes actually get paid, so again, athletes are getting paid in college today. Open Doors is an app that you use to manage that compensation. We've processed over $200 million in the last 12 months to college athletes, and we analyze and provide insights back to the industry through that information. We've been around since 2012. I played football at Nebraska and with a guy named Ndamukong Suh, and started to help athletes like that manage their NIL before it was called NIL. And now we're partners with more than 200 schools across the country that use our products, and we're more on the technology side of this industry.
And Brittany?
Yeah, great. I'm Vice President at Altia Sports Partners. We specialize and work with college athletic departments. So we're a group of industry leading experts and advisors that help athletic departments, brands, athletes really navigate the collegiate landscape and work through whether that be what technology they may use to help athletes monetize on their NIL, or just an athletic department as a whole think through just strategies, infrastructure to really leverage NIL opportunities as well as generate revenue. In addition to that, we work directly with brands. So educating brands on how to enter the college athletics landscape and really capitalize on national campaigns with athletes.
So I want to start by talking about technology, because I don't think that anyone or the common audience knows exactly how athletes are striking NIL deals. Some of it is through agencies, some of it might be through Open Doors. How are these deals happening, and what's the tech that's involved?
Certainly, in the world of an athlete, there's really 3 C's of technology. There's competition technology in college sports, so what they're using to study film and learn the playbook. There's communication technology, which is what the schools are using to say, hey, the bus leaves at 6 o'clock, be on time. And then there's the commerce technology. The commerce technology is new. This is where they're actually monetizing their name, image, and likeness. And as it relates to compensation on that side of it, about 80% of all compensation in college athletics comes from what's called collectives. So you guys, anyone ever heard of a collective, been asked to give money to a collective?
Anyone funded one?
Anyone, yeah.
Anyone given any money?
These are donor-funded entities that are basically compensating athletes what is akin to a salary for attending their favorite school and playing their favorite sport. So those payments are all being given to a group who aggregates and then distributes the dollars to athletes based on what they believe is their value and contribution. So from a technology standpoint, organizing and equipping these groups to be able to pay athletes every 2 weeks and track all the activities in which they are doing to earn that compensation, because they cannot be paid simply for breathing or being an athlete. They must be paid for an NIL deal or activity. So technology is used to track the payments, the activities, and ultimately get the athletes their tax documentation at the end of the year so they can file their taxes.
Brittany, I want to ask, what are the good schools who are dominating college sports right now, who are at the forefront of NIL and winning championships and getting these monster deals for people from the age of 18 to 22? What are they doing in comparison to schools who maybe are afraid to embrace some of this but have to?
Yeah. You know, I think we're at a point where most schools are embracing this. Where you're seeing the differences are some schools are really being proactive with their strategy and also their investments into the infrastructure, into the resources for the athletes, and really leveraging the entire ecosystem. So Blake talked about collectives, right? From our standpoint, there's 2 types of NIL. You have the organic NIL, which is probably what you think about when you think about brands connecting with athletes. You see that in the professional leagues, brands serving as ambassadors, social media content posts. And then you have the synthetic, which is your collectives, right? Your collectives are creating this synthetic market that is based off of funds that are pulled together to really help support the school and the competitiveness of the programs. And so when you think about that, you have this market, and you have the schools that are really leveraging the entire ecosystem and being proactive in thinking through where they want to compete, how they want to compete, and then finding the unique opportunities to create advantages in that space. And so it really comes to strategy and investing in infrastructure, whether that's people on campus to leverage opportunities, as well as technology.
One of the things you just said was infrastructure, and anyone who has followed college sports knows is that this industry has been called the Wild Wild West ever since NIL was approved some years ago. Now that we're past that and everyone's having to embrace it, what needs innovation?
Well, over the next 12 months, everyone in college athletics is going to go through another evolution. So about 4 years ago, everyone found out that name, image, and likeness compensation was coming to college athletics. There's a House versus NCAA settlement, this lawsuit, class action lawsuit that is today. We're hearing more about what will be determined. But this will allow schools to compensate college athletes on a campus up to $22 million a year they can distribute across the student athletes on campus.
You going back to school?
Oh, yeah, I'm going to get part of that. Yeah, I got a year left of eligibility.
I'm going to play for Colorado. You play for Nebraska again.
I think we'll win that one.
Yeah, I'll join Shedeur Sanders.
Yes. But, Shedeur, he needs some help. Colorado plays Nebraska this weekend, so please cheer for Nebraska. The innovation that's coming to this world is going to be tied to getting more structure. So why the college athletic departments, and Brittany can talk about the conversations they're having, they're excited to have rules. The courts are actually going to govern college athletics compensation for the next 10 years based on the settlement terms of this class action lawsuit. And that will turn it from the Wild Wild West to something mild West. It will still be strange, and there will be ways to circumvent the salary cap and whatnot. So the innovation or the preparation for the future is going to come from how do these schools start to operate in a world where they know now they are compensating athletes directly. Right now there's a lot of plausible deniability. Someone else is paying my athletes, not me. Mm-hmm. I can't control it. 12 months from now, they will be paying athletes directly. So how do they control that? How do they prepare to operate more in a professional sports model in the college space?
Brittany, let's talk about collectives and how that impacts them. If schools are able to compensate and conferences are able to compensate athletes, what happens to collectives? Are they still going to be doing this? Does this supercharge a potential 18-year-old coming into college?
Yeah. I think that's to be determined in terms of what that looks like. Right now, collectives are still a part of the ecosystem and need to be part of, overall strategy in terms of what that looks like inside the cap. So you have the revenue share payments, and then there still will be outside the cap, right? Dollars that will go to the athletes. That is the space collectives will play in. Really until there is some form of enforcement or regulation that may change that. That may make it a little bit tougher for collectives to operate in that space.
So now let's talk about private equity. They have jumped into college sports, maybe the SEC, maybe the Big 12. What impact can this have on college sports, period? Because they're also trying to go into the NFL, the NBA. How does this impact college sports?
In our conversations with athletic directors across Power 4, there's a wide range of how athletic departments make money today and how many of them can actually afford to spend $22 million a year compensating their athletes and be competitive in this new landscape. And for them to find additional resources and access to private equity is something that I think a lot of probably your lower half of Power 4 schools would be looking into to have, additional cash in the coffers to compensate athletes. But it's going to be transformative in terms of the expectations. What's going to sound interesting is that when you hear an athletic director like, well, we've got to start to think like a business. We have to make more money and spend less money. Doesn't that sound wild? I mean, in this room, that sounds like all of us have to do that all day, every day. But in college athletics, there's more and more money coming in. They're nonprofits. They have to spend to get it down to their budget to zero each year. It's going to be a new world when they have to start to think more like a business.
What were they doing before?
Their average Power 4 athletic department has 300 full-time employees, and it's simply because they have the money and can just keep spending it. If they don't spend it, then they have to give it back to the university or contribute in different ways. So they just find ways to spend the money. That's why you see grand facilities, coaches getting paid an ungodly amount because they don't have to pay their labor force, if you will, the athletes themselves. That's going to change.
So now, how do these changes impact both of your businesses? I think the companies who are able to start a fluent business from the beginning are reaping the benefits of it. Brittany, Altius, how does this impact you going forward?
Yeah. You know, it's a continuation of where we have been with our schools, right? From the beginning of NIL, we've been a leading advisor in the space and helping them navigate really NIL, the do's and the don'ts. Early on, it was education. Now it's more about how are we going to move forward with a framework that is in place and a strategy and infrastructure for revenue sharing, right? What does that look like? How are our coaches talking about that in the recruiting process? How are we planning for it financially? How are we forecasting how we will handle this as a department? So from our perspective, we're really still working with the schools to really help them evolve the business model, right? Think about creative ways to generate revenue now that you have athlete commercial rights as part of it, right? And so it's a continuous evolution of the landscape, and we're alongside our partners as we do that.
You haven't said all of the schools that Altius is partnered with. There's some pretty big schools out there. Can you say some of those?
Yes, we work with nearly half of the Power 5, Michigan, Nebraska. I'll mention that for Blake as well. So when you think about Power 4, Power 5 conferences, we're working with over half of those programs and have individuals on campus. I mentioned Michigan. We have an executive general manager there that is essentially a senior leader on campus that is really helping the institution to navigate this commercial space of athletes and commercial rights. Yeah.
Has there ever been a time better than today to be a college athlete?
It's looking pretty good. I mean, we do these distributions to our partners, these books that include annual earnings expectations for athletes based on sport and position. So if you were a top 10 quarterback in the SEC right now, your average annual compensation is $1,043,252 a year.
I don't think you should have said that, because there's going to be some parents here who are going to come back home to their kids today and be like, listen, things are going to change.
Yeah, start throwing football.
Things are going to start to change.
That's right. Yeah, so it's a good time, but there's more coming. If you want to talk about pro sports compared to college sports, they're starting off with a 22% of the earned revenue of college athletic departments going to the student athletes that can, right? And the collectively bargained numbers in pro sports is 50%, right? In the European sports ecosystem, 99.9% of all earned revenues for European soccer teams go to player salaries. So we're starting at 22% in college. This number will go up. If you believe that athletes will get paid more in the future than they're getting paid right now, you should keep an eye on this NIL space, because in the college sports ecosystem, the dollars are flowing their way, and it'll just get bigger and bigger.
If I could add to that, you know, being a former athlete, I think now is a great time for a student athlete. If you think about student athletes, they are students, right? They have this experience, this opportunity now to learn about how to build a personal brand, how to negotiate a contract, all of these skill sets that I'm sure many of you use in your current positions. So on campuses, not only do you have opportunity to earn money and maybe have a nice nest egg as you look to start your life, you have the ability to really gain some skill sets that are necessary as you're thinking about what's next for you, whether you're going on to play professionally or going on to be a professional otherwise. And so I think it's a great opportunity for athletes right now to be in this position. And many of them are engaging in it in a responsible way and thinking about creative ways that they can monetize on their NIL and then also plan for the future.
The last thing that I want to ask you all before we open this up for questions to the audience is, what tech do you think could have a positive impact on NIL, and what do you think needs to go away? Is there something like that? And this is a question on the spot, so if you don't know, that's fine.
I think that every student athlete should get set up on Invesco QQQ. Right, Ryan? Okay, that was good. We had to say that. No, but that's true. There is, everyone here probably went to school, okay? And I want you to think back to yourself. You're 18 years old. You get done with class. You go back for the first time in your life. You're living by yourself in college. And you check your bank account. And you have $250,000 in it. Can you imagine like what you would do as an 18-year-old first time on your own for $250,000, $100,000? I mean, if you had $250, you're like balling, right? That was top notch. Money management will be critical for this generation. We provide, they are 1099. We cannot withhold taxes. We spend education sessions across the country. Y'all do it too, explaining what taxes are. The highest earning athletes are coming from football and men's basketball, and sometimes they're coming from a place where they have not had any introduction to the concept of income tax. Some of them have gotten their very first bank account when they get their very first check for $100,000. They haven't had a bank account until they get their first $100,000. Wealth creation is very real. Technology and solutions to help young people manage money are going to be critical. And unlike pro sports, there are 500,000 college athletes. Right? Everyone in this room, you could say, hey, I work with this athlete, whatever it is. But there are now 500,000 new names out there that all need help.
I want to open this up to the audience for a couple questions in the back. We're going to get you a microphone.
Apologies, very eager with my hand up there. Other than money management for college athletes, what risks do you foresee off the field for them?
Yeah, risk in terms of for college athletes engaging in this space?
Absolutely.
Yeah. You know, there's always going to be bad actors in the industry, right? When you think about the amounts of money that are flowing to athletes, you can think about the people that are there making decisions on who's surrounding them. So I think that those are some of the pitfalls, right? Athletes really taking a step back, thinking about the individuals that are surrounding them, helping them make these decisions about their money, and even in this day and age where they play, right? The transfer portal is part of that, right? And so taking a step back and having a really good mindset when it comes to those individuals that are surrounding them and helping them make those day-to-day decisions.
Right here.
Good question.
Just from a sports fan perspective, I think the general perception is the NIL is kind of the wild, wild west.
Sure.
That it hasn't really been implemented in an effective manner. And then when you combine that with the transfer portal, you've got players moving without having to sit out a year, plus NIL. I'm just curious, based on your expertise, how do you see this shaking out over time, and what happens with the NCAA as a result of it?
Right now, the House settlement, which is, again, we're talking about a little bit today, you should be looking and Googling NCAA House just to figure out what's going to go happen over the next 12 months. The terms of the settlement are going to try and limit third-party compensation. So in every collective bargaining agreement in pro sports, there's this non-circumvention clauses. Basically, that the owners can't circumvent the salary cap by paying through side vehicles. These collectives are basically side vehicles for college sports. They're going to try and have a independent third party determine every payment over $600 to college athletes, whether it is in fact for a bona fide business purpose, and that is to try and create some circumvention rules and governance in college sports. The next part about this is transferring. So right now, there's an injunctive, I think it's the right word, there's a situation going on where basically athletes can transfer. There's no rules. NCAA can't enforce.
You could transfer, and to put that in perspective, you could go into college in Texas, make $200,000, transfer, go to Georgia, transfer again, and collect money in each opportunity.
Yeah, it's unlimited free agency and no salary cap. So they're trying to create rules. To limit that, it will be really tough to restrict movement without an actual collective bargaining agreement. They're contemplating putting in, sorry, the last piece of this is buyout clauses in college athlete contracts.
Interesting. Mayor?
Could you talk about where any initial flow of institutional capital is headed in terms of investing? I mean, you mentioned the business of serving asset management for people with new wealth. So you could, I guess, fund new businesses or new ventures, kind of oriented with that. But both where it's going now and if there are areas that you think are early where there's some potential for, again, institutional capital to be investing in the opportunity here.
I can take this first. I think it really depends on where the conference. So there's different conferences across the Big 12, the SEC, the ACC, the Big 10. All of these conferences have different businesses, some rooted in, some of them make their money majority from football, some from basketball. I think private equity is going to come in sometimes as a title sponsor, sometimes wanting to fund programs. Blake, what do you see?
Yeah, we're all talking to athletic directors all the time, so I'm actually curious what you're seeing.
Yeah, I think that's also part of it, and then I think at a granular level in terms of institutions, like they're going to have to modernize and generate more revenue. So it's like, what are some early opportunities where companies can come alongside them and help them really think outside the box in terms of leveraging revenue generation in this space, right? And so we talked earlier about private equity having interest in this space. Private equity has interest because they see opportunity, right? Grand opportunity in the space, and probably not schools that aren't leveraging all of the opportunities that they have. And so I think just generally, companies focus on revenue generation and what that looks like in college athletics may have opportunity coming.
The mechanism for private equity, most of these things are structured where these are public institutions. Athletic departments are public institutions, so a private investment into a public entity, like that's an issue for a lot of people. So they're forming a new company, right, that sits over here. The athletic department assigns all their revenue streams to the new company. So instead of the media rights going to the school, which is a public institution, it goes to NewCo. That NewCo can take on private equity investment as a private company. And then the athletic department is then asking for money. I'm just saying, I need $100 million this year. So if the NewCo makes $150 million, then they can just keep $50 million over there. Then I can use that for capital projects in the future, versus having that $150 million come in, and I had $100 million, then I have to either spend it real quick or give it back to the public institution. So it allows money to sit in college athletics in a private entity that's being drawn from, but it requires the athletic department to assign all the revenue streams to a new company, which they do have a share in that revenue, of course, but the private entity that's funding it is getting the upside of the fact that, again, you saw sports valuations downstairs are growing. The value of every college, if you put a franchise value on every college sports program, it's growing too, but there's no way to extract any capital out of it unless you have private equity set up and a NewCo you're pulling from.
Are those NewCo structures happening right now?
That's, yes, those are the ones that are being contemplated across the country. Is it Florida State that's the that's the furthest along?
Yeah, I don't think any institution has taken the step of creating that yet, but it's definitely something in the landscape that there's been a lot of discussion around that.
All in progress. Looks like we're going to get you a mic.
Thank you. A lot of the nil deals seem to fall around basketball and football, quasi making them professional leagues, and you can call it the minor league for the NFL, WNBA, and the NBA. What happens to every other sport? What happens to lacrosse, soccer, and all of these other sports that historically don't make money for their universities?
Well, traditionally, football and basketball feed into those programs. I think the athletes themselves, naturally, the biggest players, football, basketball, will make more. It doesn't mean that those athletes who are playing other sports won't. I mean, you look at Livy Dunn, for example. She's one of the highest earners across college sports, period. You said she's an exception? She is, but there will be more. It depends on your branding. It depends on how you choose to activate around these things, the people that you put around them as well. She has a great group around her, and she's maximized her earning potential. She's around. But you're right. I do think that over time, there will be a lacrosse superstar. There are already softball superstars. Will we hear about them in the same way that we hear about football and basketball? Probably not. The media deals are different. If you are watching college football right now, we know the stars that we're going to see on Saturday. Shedeur Sanders, Quinn Ewers, I forgot the Nebraska quarterback. But
Dylan Raiola. Yeah.
Patrick Mahomes Jr.
Yeah, you remember.
I was walking around like. But yes, I think it depends on a case-by-case basis, but over time, there will be more superstars, and Caitlin Clark is a perfect example of that. Juju Watkins next.
Quick data on this. If you talk about organic NIL or commercial NIL, real NIL, what you think as God intended it, Invesco QQ type of ads, right? These, if you just look at that, women out-earn men, and non-revenue sports are getting more deals than revenue sports athletes. Football players and basketball players are sitting back and taking checks from donors. They don't put in the work to actually show up in advertisements and commercials. So if you look at NIL and endorsements as God intended it, or as the NCAA intended it, they're not God. Maybe lower than that. Yeah, the non-revenue sports and women are actually out-earning their peers, which is interesting.
I want to go back to collectives before we take another audience question. Can you all speak to the impact that they've had? There's been so many complaints. I mean, we've heard Nick Saban. He accused Jackson State a couple years ago of buying out Travis Hunter, who's now a Heisman candidate. We've heard Ryan Day speak about how he needed $10 million to keep his roster when, in fact, this year it's $20 million. What are collectives doing to impact college sports besides compensating them, and how are they raising this money?
Yeah, college sports, it differs from professional sports because we have donors and irrational giving, right? Like donors want to see their programs win, and they will do what they need to support those programs to do so, right? And so when you see a coach come out and say how much he or she may need to recruit and be competitive in the landscape, there's a group of donors that are circling around and figuring out, like, how do we make this happen? We're passionate about our team. We want to see coach win, right? And so, I think you will continue to see that type of giving. That's what makes college sports college sports.
Right.
You have alumni. You have so many people that are cheering for their programs. Nebraska here, going against Colorado. And so I think you will continue to see donors in this space. I do think it's a challenge. I think we have to think about, is the model sustainable long term, when it comes to collectives. And the demands, and that's why you are seeing, with the pending House settlement, schools will now have the ability to pay athletes directly, right? So looking to kind of shift that landscape a little bit from schools paying athletes directly and less of the collective dollars doing so. And so it'll be very interesting to see what it looks like, but I do think that you will always have donors and supporters that are thinking about how can we get a competitive advantage and how can we help our teams win.
I give one in early 2021 or right as NIL started. TJ, who's here on the phone, hi TJ. TJ works at Open Doors too. We got to join a very interesting call where we're partners with Team USA. We run their NIL platform and endorsement for all the Team USA athletes, and we joined a call where Mr. Phil Knight was interested in leveraging NIL to keep Oregon competitive. And he's
been trying to win a national championship there for a long time. I hope NIL helps.
Yeah, and they had put together a very robust group of former Nike executives to put what is deemed a collective for Oregon athletes, and this is very early on. What an advantage, yeah.
I was going to say, we'll have Deja Kelly, who's at Oregon right now, a little later, so she can speak to that.
And she was at North Carolina.
Right.
And now she's at Oregon. It's interesting. But these groups, the schools that are winning collectives today, they had somebody like that in their community that could start it quick and fund it quick. And those that are behind are simply, they didn't have someone like that. And so the winning collectives that are well funded usually have professionals with a lot of capital.
How many of your alma maters have a Phil Knight? Not many.
Not many, yeah.
In the back corner?
Hi. I'm curious as to with the schools beginning to be able to pay athletes directly, with the approval of the House settlement, what the industry insiders are thinking about in terms of the impact of Title IX on that, because Title IX, right, doesn't apply to collectives, but it applies to certain aspects of how schools fund athletics directly, and whether that would apply, whether Title IX would apply to these payments or not, is of great interest.
Yeah. That's a very good question. And institution by institution, each of them have a different approach when it comes to revenue sharing and where they stand in terms of the equitable approach in that, right? And so, there's 2 or 3 ways that schools are thinking about distributing those funds, and part of it may be based on market, right? Like based on, we talked about what football players earn, the average there, right? And so in a market-based approach, majority of the revenues may go to football, men's basketball athletes, right? In an equitable approach, which some leaders across the country have come out and said that they plan to distribute those funds equitably, they would look at it like they have scholarships and other things from a Title IX perspective. It's a very good question. Title IX NIL is being challenged. It's to be determined in what that really looks like. But right now it's an institution by institution approach, and how their general counsels and how their leaderships really stand and feel when it comes to distributing the revenues to the athletes. And I would say the schools vary in their approach that we work with.
Got time for 2 more right here. Go.
Just have a brief question. As a former athlete myself, and my firm has worked with over 200 athletes on a professional level, primarily NFL, NBA. If these kids are like me in college, when I got a $2,500 Pell Grant check, my mother and father couldn't tell me anything. And so I work very closely with the NFL, Mothers and Fathers Association, NBA, Mothers and Fathers Association, and we found that young men that have good parents involved have a better outcome, right? And so a question that I have, and I just recently seen it at a Big 12 school, I'm not sure if the school is still in the Big 12, but a kid got $800,000, and, you know, IMG kid, agents calling, they, you know, trying to get after him. And so I called his mom, Mom, how are you coming along? You played your first game last week, so on and so forth. Mom said, he doesn't really talk to me anymore. He's got this check. He's got these interesting group of people around him. I don't even know what he's doing. So with all this education flowing from the university down, how can we educate the parents? Because I see things that maybe you all don't see. I'm dealing with the individual. You guys are dealing with the institution. When your mother made $30,000 a year working 2 jobs, and this school just give you $800,000, and you come from a certain environment, that's a different level of a conversation.
Yeah.
So has there been anything created to educate the parents?
I can take this. I don't think so. I mean, quite frankly, I don't think so. It's on a case-by-case basis. Every athlete has different surroundings from them. I mean, a little cousin of mine just committed to Akron. He has a good community around him, so he knows exactly what he's going to be paid, how to pay taxes. However, as you said, there's going to be kids who come from lower income and are going to be exploited, unfortunately, by people who are like, hey, you're a 5-star athlete, we're going to get you $600,000, handing us $600,000, and that's a lot. Maybe it's $200,000, maybe it's $150,000. Regardless, it's money that's going to impact their lives long term. I think the best solution is educating some of these kids at the earliest point. When you recognize, okay, he's doing some unnatural things on the football field or on the basketball court, then it's like, okay, this is how we're going to set this up. This is how we're going to do this. Now, how do you do that? I'll leave it to you two, because I don't know. Go ahead.
If I could just add, you know, I do think that it's a program by program approach, and I do think that we're probably referring to football. There are some programs that have invested in the resources to surround that athlete, right? To make sure that they have an awareness of the resources around them. Someone that's really making sure that they're looking out for those bad actors, as I mentioned earlier. And so I do think that the programs are getting more sophisticated around the resources surrounding the athletes now that there's more dollars flowing into them. And they're also staffing it in such a way, right? And so I do think that this is new for college athletics. I think we will continue to evolve. You will see more support and resources surrounding the athlete. But I still think that, unfortunately, that's going to happen, right? It is going to still occur, but the more that programs and the leadership of the programs truly care about that athlete and their well-being, the best, And I think for a parent on a recruiting visit is asking about those resources. Like, how are you going to help him navigate and manage this money that he has coming in? What education are you providing, right? Some of those key questions I think parents need to ask during the recruiting trail, and you can really have a really good understanding of the leadership of the program and truly where some of their value is in caring for the athletes.
We got time for one more.
Real quick. Well, first and foremost, Blake, I'm gonna need one of those black books you got.
They're on sale. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Prior to me being an investor, I worked in basketball operations for an NBA team, and at that time we were allowed to draft high school players, and then they got rid of that because it got a little bit messy on the AAU circuit. I guess my question is, with respect to how things trickle down, where do you see the impact on letters of intent? Because I would imagine at certain points that would have to be more of a valid contract than it is now, because essentially you have 24-hour free agency.
Yeah, certainly. Right now I was on a Power 4 campus on Tuesday this week, and their very first class, 2025, when they show up to campus next year, they'll be getting payments from the school. And so right now we're getting a general counsel review on this campus. If the athletes can sign a agreement to compensation terms in November of this year, that would begin next year if they're allowed to sign that. And then within that, what are they actually committing to stay in that market? Are there certain buyout terms? We do know that within interconference transfers, certain conferences are contemplating having agreements that say if you transfer from one whatever school to this school, then that school has to buy out what is remaining on your agreement here, similar to a coach payment. So it's there's infrastructure for restricting movement of coaches that all these athletic directors are familiar with. They're looking to apply that same logic to the student athletes, but it's going to be, again, a challenge from a collective bargaining agreement to enforce those things. Athletes will need support in reviewing the agreements in which they're signing. We go back to some of the challenges of parents and whatnot. There's no certification to be an NIL agent. Agents, the most predatory behavior in this space is some agents are taking 20% of a collective check, which
And in professional sports, it's normally 1 to 5.
yeah. So if there's a year from now, there will be each school in the Power Four spending $22 million. That's going to be 70 times 22 million. That's 1.5 billion. If you take another group of 5 spending 10 million each, you're going to have $2.2 billion spent on college athletes starting next July. If there's a market out there for predatory behavior, it will be in representation of that 2.2 billion and taking 10 to 20%, which will be approximately 200 to 400 million dollars to individuals which have no certification to represent athletes in any which way. So, yeah, I don't know. Somewhere in there is an opportunity and also a problem.
We'll leave it there. Thank you, Brittany. Thank you, Blake. Thank you, Invesco QQQ. Continue to chat. Enjoy your lunch. We'll see you back on 7.